timer. Um, I'm going to start in 3, 2, 1. So opening opposition basically brought two things in this debate. Firstly, they told us that states are bad actors because space research is politicized and it takes away the money that could have been used for affirmative actions. We say that this is a false assumption. Just because there is a rise of space companies doesn't mean that states are willing to let go of NASA. If they agree that NASA is such a big deal to the US, right? I don't understand why the government would let go of it. We're going to prove why the reactions of this government will sacrifice way more people and way more tax money. But second of all, they also told us that accountability don't exist because there is monopoly of power, because there's the monopoly of party system inside the government, right? But if you compare between Elon Musk, who aren't pressured politically and basically, he can self-sustain, and states who still relies on the people, I think that by default, there will be better degree of likelihood of people to compromise with the government, of the government to compromise with the people, because they are still reliant on states' political power, right? So I'm going to bring two things in my speech. First, I'm going to talk about why better allocation of resources can only happen under our side of the house. And second of all, I'm going to bring an extension of why capitalist tycoons leading the space race would only set a trend of normalization of no ROI. But sure, first argument, right? Why better allocation of resources can only happen under our side. Firstly, I think that under opposition side, they will need to defend a world where national space research centers like NASA still exist, right? Because obviously, just because there's a rising trend of capitalist tycoons leading the race, that doesn't automatically shut out the existence of those institutions. That doesn't automatically shut out the importance of NASA to people in power, to people who are politicizing NASA. However, we say that therefore the comparative is not the of NASA versus the existence of SpaceX. The comparative looks like the money of investors who invest in SpaceX because of its glamour takes away the investment that could have been done for NASA or any government-led space institution. Why is this harmful? We say that it's because space races that are led by the government have a different approach with SpaceX, because most of their money comes from the tax, and to some extent, NASA is politicized. We say that this is good. We say that we agree NASA is politicized. It is more likely the case that they are approaching a space research that directly involves a lot of people's lives. It looks like finding an alternative place to live when Earth is no longer inhabitable. It looks like researching about the impacts of climate change that would benefit the success of sustainable environment benefits under our side. Sure, maybe they also to some extent have arms race, but we say that they will never left behind the kind of research that involves a lot of people's life. That's because they still need the approval of people in order for them to allocate their tax money. However, capitalist tycoons are more likely to do projects that are glamorous, that targets the upper class billionaires because they care more about the return and image of their company. This looks like space travel for recreational needs, for example. This is bad because then state-funded space research would less likely get that much money, even though they already have tax money. This is the reason why this is very, very problematic. The impact of this tax money the impact of this NASA relying only to tax money looks like NASA having to take more money from taxes, which means that things like affirmative action needs to be cut more. And it looks like what we see during the Trump's administration, when the government has to invest more and more money for space race because they still want to have political approval. But even if we're talking about governments that are benevolent and charitable, they will still cut off affirmative actions for NASA. That's because the research of NASA are actually important and essential for people's sustainability. That's the reason why you will most likely sacrifice people who are vulnerable under your side of the house. The comparative is under our side because there's less likely going to be any choice for rich investors to invest on space companies. They're just likely to invest their money on NASA because the more money means NASA are likely to return those investments as opposed to not being able to return it under your side. That's the reason why no investors would be investing on NASA if we do have this rise of choice where people can invest on. But we're going to be charitable and explain why even if we do have investments from other stakeholders, governments still have more control. That's because obviously we're going to have caps to how much people can invest on us. So we know how much control and what kind of project we will have, right? But under opposition, you're going to leave full control to the capitalist tycoons, that's when you're going to waste a lot of resources that could have been used for more useful research. So therefore, we don't care if the state is good or bad. We told you that what is certain is that the reaction of those governments who still want to sustain NASA will sacrifice a lot of resources. This point is so important because because we are preventing the cost of space race that is already taking away so much from the people from being more severe. But before I continue, I'll take CO.
NASA actually rarely builds their own rocket. Even the Orion that is being used by Neil Armstrong is also built by Lockheed Martin. And the only time where NASA actually focused on building rockets is when Blue Origin and SpaceX actually become something that is very triumph in 2010 to begin with. So what you want is innovation. Private industry is the one that will catalyze those innovations to begin with.
We don't care because the types of innovation that will exist is controlled by the state as opposed to innovations that are controlled by Elon Musk. But second point then, it's also because space companies that are rising under their side contribute so much damages for environment. The reason is if this kind of business is rising, it's more likely that the narrative of success is going to portray Elon Musk as the epitome of an ideal entrepreneur. That means that is going to set a trend that people need to build space companies. The unique characterization of space companies and why this is harmful is because they need to go big. Unlike other business models, you have to have a rocket, for example, in order for you to be able to build SpaceX. So trials and errors are so much more costly and so much more likely to happen under their side of the house. But thirdly, it's also because, as Rakian told you, limitation of data access and monetization of research will exist under their side of the house. That's because much more likely, in order for them to compete against other companies, they need to hold a patent against for their research, right? That means there's going to be a repetitive research that wastes so much resources under their side of the house. That's also harmful because then people wouldn't be able to access what kind of researches that would have been essential for their life. But second of all, right, why capitalist tycoons leading the space race would only set a trend of normalization of no ROI. This is the reason why our point matters. That's because space race companies are very, very difficult to build. That means that if people are competing to invest on these types of companies, they're going to normalize the existence of no ROI. They're going to normalize no accountability to these types of projects because they are able to be swayed by the CEOs saying that this kind of research is hard and this kind of research does not return fast. So that's the reason why this also harms the investors. Because of these reasons, we're proud to propose.